Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
A pay raise for federal employees in 2027 is looking even further out of reach. The House Appropriations Committee has advanced spending legislation that makes no mention of a federal pay raise next year. That aligns with the White House's omission of a civilian pay raise in its budget request from earlier this month. Here with the latest is Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Nice to be with you, Terry.
Does this really mean that there's no possibility for a federal pay raise next year?
Nothing is impossible, and we're not going to see all of this ironed out officially until most likely December. But the House Appropriations Committee's bill for financial services and general government for fiscal 2027, after that passed this week along party lines, or at least advanced out of the committee, that lowers the chances that federal employees are going to see a pay raise starting in January. That comes after, as you said, the White House's budget proposal from early April, where they included a 5 to 7% pay raise for military members, but made no mention whatsoever of civilian federal employees. So that disparity there is plus now with the House Republicans bill siding with that as well and not issuing some sort of alternative to the budget proposal. All that essentially means that federal employees are still on this track to see a 0% raise next year.
As you said, though, the bill has just come out of committee. So what are the possibilities that something different could happen?
There's still possibilities for House lawmakers to decide something different before they pass the final budget or the final spending bill for this section of the government's budget. There's also a possibility for Senate lawmakers to determine something different on their side. And then there's also the possibility of President Trump by August issuing an alternative pay plan that may say something different than the 0%. If we look to last year, for example, and how this process worked, there was similar steps in the early process where we didn't see a pay raise included in the White House budget request. But then later in August, President Trump did include a 1% pay raise for most civilian federal employees. So there's all these possibilities. There's also the FAIR Act in the House, which is a bill from Democrats that would give federal employees a 4.1% pay raise. So there are some options on the table, but the chances are still, I would say, low for us to see something different. Most likely it would be from, I would say, President Trump's alternative pay plan if we were going to see something different. But again, it's not really clear whether or how likely that really is.
So we want to leave a little morsel of hope out there, but also be realistic about this.
Exactly. I think that's a good way to put it. There's not, it's not an impossibility at this point, and we're not going to see anything become truly official, as I mentioned, until December, when President Trump would sign an executive order with whatever pay raise he's planning for January and on in 2027. So until we see that executive order, there are a couple options still on the table.
From a bigger perspective, what else is included in this spending bill?
This spending bill is one of 12. The Financial Services and General Government bill covers agencies like the Treasury Department, Office of Personnel Management, General Services Administration, Small Business Administration, and a couple other smaller agencies. In total, for this particular spending bill, there's House lawmakers are looking at a discretionary budget of $25.3 billion for fiscal 2027. Just to put that in perspective, it's a 3.8% decrease from the current enacted spending levels, or in numbers, $1 billion less than what those agencies combined have right now for their discretionary spending. So if you break it down a little bit further, Treasury is going to see one of the bigger cuts from this bill. They would get $12 billion in funding, which is about $1 billion less than their current enacted funding. It's still not as steep of a cut as the Trump administration wants. They proposed in their budget request $1.5 billion versus $1 billion in cuts for Treasury for 2027. There's also a smaller budget for OPM, GSA's federal buildings fund, though, would get a slight boost. So there's a little bit of mix in the numbers here, but across the board, there is going to be at least somewhat of a cut under this House proposal.
Does that proposal say anything about OPM's budget and spending priorities?
So the budget that they're, if you just look at the top line spending that they're going for in 2027, it would include $418 million for OPM. It's a relatively small budget because it is a small agency, but that's actually higher than what the White House included in its budget request. They're looking for $375 million for OPM. So House is saying maybe a little bit higher than what the White House is wanting. But if you look into some of the provisions and the details of the spending legislation here, committee lawmakers are also encouraging OPM to continue some of their ongoing initiatives towards modernizing HR systems. That's a project that OPM has talked about pretty extensively, where they're trying to take all these disparate HR systems that different agencies use and consolidate them and modernize them, put everything onto a single platform. That might be still a few years out from now in terms of those efforts, but it's something where we are seeing now House lawmakers say, yes, like OPM continue working towards that goal. They're also encouraging OPM to continue their federal hiring reforms, plans to connect with industry and the private sector for outreach and recruitment. So there's a lot in there where they're trying to just express that they're encouraging OPM to continue on the track that it has been for at least the last year or so.
Well, that's good to hear that progress can continue. Were there any other policy riders of note that might affect federal employees in this bill?
There were a couple small ones that would affect federal employees. One would prohibit agencies from using funding for training or implementation of any diversity, equity, inclusion, or accessibility initiatives. That's something we've heard the Trump administration talk about pretty extensively. So not entirely a surprise that Republicans are including that in their spending bill here as well. Another provision that's included in the bill would just require agencies to use official time in, quote, an honest effort to perform official duties. Official time, which is something that has been a bit of a contentious topic between Republicans and Democrats. So just seeing that is of note, perhaps, to federal employees and the unions who represent them. And then finally, there's one new provision that would essentially codify a current prohibition on the coverage of gender-affirming care through the Federal Employees Health Benefits, or FEHB program. Right now, OPM has barred FEHB carriers from covering gender-affirming care. That's for gender transition surgery or things that support transgender employees. And if this bill is passed as is, it would essentially put that prohibition into law. So a couple, tweaks here and there, but bottom line is they're looking for, some changes at least.
That's Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, we always appreciate your close read of this legislation.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
You can find her story at federalnewsnetwork.com.